Hey physics crew, in this video I'm going to be working number 3 from your homework 4.3.3. It is one of the more difficult problems as far as the algebra steps and using your calculator. So I want to take some time and hit this again. I did do it in the other video, but it will be in the context of your homework. So hopefully you try this first on your own and then come back to this video with questions and having kind of worked through it yourself. And then I think it'll make a lot more sense as we work through it. The key to this is working the steps, writing the correct equation, substituting correctly, and then following the algebra rules. So there isn't like a one shoe fits all as far as exactly how you do it. That's why we give you the steps, because it's a process and it's almost like putting a puzzle together. I'm doing this step, I follow these rules to do the step, and then it unlocks what I should do for the next step. And then I plug in the pieces and I look at it, and then it unlocks what happens next. The more difficult the problem becomes, the more important it is that you do that. And you do it piece by piece. You don't try to jump forward and just skip to the next step, and you do one step at a time. So let's jump into it. So R2D2 guess is the method we're using. So first thing we're going to do is read twice. First time I'm looking for the big idea. Your pencil is about to fall off the table. It has a mass of 0.2 kilograms and a kinetic energy of 12 joules. How fast is the pencil moving just before it hits the ground? It's moving. I hear the word kinetic energy. The big idea is kinetic energy. So that's what I'm thinking of as I go back to look for specific details with my second read. Your pencil is about to fall off the table. I'm underlining that because falling usually means little g, but I'm not sure if I'm going to need it, okay? It has a mass of 0.2 kilograms. Definitely need that mass. Has a kinetic energy of 12 joules, so that's K. How fast is the pencil moving? So that's velocity. And automatically, as soon as I've written those down, I already have picked out in my mind what equation I'm going to use. K equals 1/2 mv squared. But I'm going to continue the process and see if that's actually the correct guess. Okay, so next we're going to draw twice. This is difficult, I know, doing it with digital stuff, so please make sure you're doing your drawings on paper. So we've got a pencil. That's my pencil. It's an amazing pencil. Okay, it's about to fall off a table, and when it falls, it has a mass equal to 0.2 kilograms. And the kinetic energy just right here at the bottom, so K is right there at the bottom, is going to be 12 joules. What is the pencil's velocity just before it hits the ground? So that means it's that split second right before it hits the ground, because once it hits the ground, it's going to stop moving, right? So that very split instant right before it hits the ground, what is its maximum velocity? That's what we're looking for. And I actually think that's all I need. So let's go ahead and continue to our guess. Given unknown equation, substitute and solve is the acronym. Guess. So here's our givens. M equals 0.2 kilograms. K equals 12 joules. And we are looking for velocity equals question mark. That is my unknown. So given unknown equation. So now I'm going to pick an equation. My equation is going to be, we could look at our equation sheet, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be K equals 1/2 mv squared, okay? So let's take a second though and go look at our equation sheet just to make sure that we are understanding what's going on. Go to files, go to our equation sheet. So just to point out, we are here in the energy section, and here is the kinetic energy equation, okay? Now I want you to notice we have an unknown that says V equals question mark. And in quarter one, we talked about you would look for an equation that says V equals something, okay? The problem is this equation doesn't have K and it doesn't have M, so you can't use that one. Doesn't have K, doesn't have M, can't use it. Doesn't have K, doesn't have M, can't use it, okay? So then we could move on over here, and there's absolutely nothing we could use here. We look over here, and we actually skipped this unit for this season of COVID, okay? And there's nothing there. This is the only equation that has mass, velocity, and K. So we have to use that equation. Okay, so notice we are no longer looking for just an equation that has our unknown equal to something. We are looking for an equation that has all of our variables. So it has K, it has M, and it has V. Okay, so let's go back to our problem and check and see if what I'm talking about makes sense. So look at it, here we go. So look at our givens. We have an M, we have a K and a V, and see that's what our equation has, K, M, and V. So that's the equation we must use. Now, so we got givens, unknown equation. Next is our substitution. We need to substitute our numbers. This is where most people are making their mistakes. So make sure you're reading your table. This is why we make the table, okay? So K is 12 joules, okay, equals 1/2 times M. M is 0.2 times 0.2 times V squared. So we have V squared. You could put it in parentheses or not, but the V is the only thing squared. Nothing else is squared. The M's not squared, the half is not squared, only the V. You got to be really careful about that. Okay, so we've substituted. We've got 12 joules. It almost doesn't look like a joules. It's me writing too fast. 12 joules, a half, and then 0.2 is our mass times V squared. So given, unknown, equation, substitute, and now we're actually going to solve. Now, some of you are doing your solve right away using this. I encourage you to actually do the solve on the next line because it'll actually save you later when you get into more complex problems, okay? Like on some of these easy problems, it seems like it's not necessary, and it may not be, but I want you to develop a good habit pattern so that when things get more difficult, it's easier to work, okay? So we're gonna make the harder problems later not be so hard. Okay, so I've brought the 12 down. A half of 0.2 is 0.1, and then I still have the V squared. So now I'm gonna do algebra. So I need V by itself, so I need to do something with the 0.1. And so 0.1 is multiplying times V, so I got to do the opposite. So 0.1 is going to divide on both sides, 0.1. So now there's no like set algebra step you're supposed to follow. You have to follow the rules of algebra, okay? So 0.1 divided by 0.1 equals 1. 1 times V squared is V squared. A lot of times we say that cancels and we get this misconception that it equals something besides 1. 2 divided by 2 equals 1. It's just that 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times V squared is V squared. So we divide it out, it cancels, and we're left with V squared. Now, 12 divided by 0.1, we're going to plug that into our calculator. And for the calculator, I recommend using Desmos. So we've got 12 divided by 0.1, which equals 120. Please use a calculator. I like to do it in my head because that's how I check my work and do some quick thinking, but I can get it wrong. So I always go back and put it in a calculator. Okay, so let's go back to our problem. Now, we are not looking for v squared, we are looking for v. So to undo the squaring, we have to do what's called the square root. So we're going to do put the square root symbol over both sides. If you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other side. So the square root of v squared is just v. And now we have to do the square root of 120. Now, if you're using Desmos, this is actually really easy. If you're using a calculator in the house, depending on what type, this might be a little more challenging. In an old school calculator, you would type the 120 first and then hit the square root button. Most modern calculators, you don't do that. You will hit the square root and then put in 120. And you can hit enter, and the answer is 10.95, and we're gonna round to the second decimal, 10.95. Go back to our problem. So 10.95 meters per second. And don't forget the units. That's a velocity, and velocity is in meters per second. So last thing we do is we do a double check. Does that make sense? That's almost 11. 11 squared is 121. And 121 times 0.2 is 242. And then times a half is about 12, if you use all the decimals correctly. I skipped a decimal thing in there in my head, okay? So it winds up working out about right. 11 meters per second is the velocity of the pencil just before it hits the ground. Okay? So that is number 3. Just make sure that you are doing the full process. R2D2 guess. GUESS. Read twice, draw twice, given unknown equation, substitute, solve. I've already given you the answers for all of your problems. I want to see your work. If you have any more questions about, for example, what does that mean? What does a radical or a square root mean? Why did I do my algebra this way? Then you definitely need to come see me during tutorial time. There are some of you that are not using this equation. You are trying to do some kind of unit analysis and using some cross multiply and divide. That will not be sufficient for this because of the squaring and because of the half. You really need to make sure you are substituting and then following your algebra steps. Okay. Alrighty. That's all I've got for this video. So keep working through those, show your work, and I will see you next time.